Jay?
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be doing this particular webinar. It's, as Karen mentioned, the very first webinar offered by your Ohio Employee owned network, and we hope it will set the stage for a future series of network webinars. We've chosen a really critical topic this morning, culture. It's obviously very, very important to all of us in an ESOP company, and any company for that matter. This morning, as I was thinking about doing the presentation, we've been preparing this for a couple days, obviously, and this morning I was thinking about the presentation. By the way, I gave a great presentation in my car on the way to work this morning, so all of you that missed that, I'm sorry, and if this one is half as good as that one, it'll be great. But my wife was talking at breakfast this morning, and she works for a large multinational corporation that you would all recognize the name of if I would mention it. You're probably customers of theirs, as a matter of fact. And she was telling me about a webinar, curiously enough, that she attended yesterday, and the subject was culture in the company. And this company has been around for who knows how many years. And as I said, they're a huge company. It just goes to show that no matter how large or small our companies are, culture is ever important. And it really is often the difference between success and failure in a company. It's something that we have to work on continuously. Looking at the roster of attendees this morning, it's good to see the level of leadership that are listening in. We have a number of CEOs and CFOs in attendance, and I'm sure when the word culture is mentioned to the leadership of a company, you recognize that it's very difficult to measure. Especially you CFOs, you're used to dealing with spreadsheets and financial statements and income statements and balance sheets, and those kinds of documents have numbers on them, okay? It's easy to measure the kinds of things that we measure through financial statements. It's not so easy to measure the level of culture. But as we're going to talk about later today, culture is just as important as any other asset that you have in the company. It's often worth much, much more if it's something that can set you apart from your competition. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing in this next hour or so. The objective that I've set for us is to know, understand, appreciate, and consider. I would like it if we come out of this session knowing what it takes to achieve and maintain an ownership culture, and that we understand that how each of us contributes, each of the employees in our companies contributes no matter what our job is, and that we have an appreciation for the positive impact that a right culture can have on your business, and that also that we consider ways of organizing tasks to get us there. What it will not do today is teach you how to establish the right culture, okay? No more than my baseball coach for years could teach me how to hit a home run. He could relate his experiences. He could show me some techniques. He could show me what works and what doesn't. He could encourage me to practice every day, but he couldn't do it for me. He couldn't, in essence, quote, teach me to do it. I had to learn on my own. That's kind of the way it is with culture. And to continue the baseball metaphor, we continually get pitches in our company that challenge us to develop this culture. It's just never ending, and we have to focus and concentrate on this part of our business just like we concentrate on serving our customer or controlling the bottom line. So we have a lot of ground to cover here, and I've made the decision, I think it's proper, that I include a lot of slides, a lot of PowerPoint slides. We'll cover a lot of ground, and I thought it would be good to do that because I want to introduce many concepts and many issues that relate to culture, And some of them will probably hit a hot button with you. And if they do, you can communicate with us through chat. Obviously, there are some disadvantages to this format. I can't see your expression. I can't see when you fall asleep, when I bore you. I also can't see your eyes get as big as saucers when I mention something that really, touches you or really turns you on, or is an issue that you're currently addressing in your in your business. So, take note of what those key issues are, what hits your hot button, and either chat, communicate with the chat, or give us feedback afterwards so that we can develop future programs and training around those specific issues that affect the culture. And how we're going to accomplish that is through this agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about what culture is. Do we really understand what culture is? We're going to talk about why culture is important. It may seem intuitively obvious to some of us, but it is not always obvious. And we're going to talk about some of the concepts that I've labeled dependency, teamwork, productivity, human capital, the value of our people working together, a little bit about the economics of culture in ESOPs, and leadership. Those are all kind of buzzwords that you're familiar with, and we're going to try to relate them to the culture development. And then we're going to move into what I call shaping ownership behaviors, a 5-stage model. Let me tell you where this approach came from. Through my experience, a number of years ago, I helped a small business owner through a succession plan. That company became an ESOP. The owner left. I was then the, quote, manager in charge, and faced with a lot of leadership challenges. One of those challenges that I frankly didn't recognize on the very first day that we became an ESOP was the culture shift that we were really faced with. And it was a significant culture shift. The culture prior to the ESOP was relatively autocratic, not a lot of communication, not a lot of participation, not a lot of decision-making that was filtered down into the organization. Certainly, the employees didn't have any of the financial information. They didn't know what was going on in the company from a financial standpoint. So I had my challenges, and the rest of the employees were challenged as well. And I started inquiring into the ESOP world, if you will. I utilized the OEOC, as a matter of fact. I was a customer with some of their training, the ESOP Association and some of the other organizations that knew about this thing called culture. And there was always a flavor of the month. There was a thing that you could try, okay? Do the brown bag lunches and do this and do that. And I tried a lot of them, and after really a couple of years, it dawned on me that there could have been, or there could be, a more focused approach to trying to do activities or taking initiatives, if you will, from a leadership standpoint that would best build this culture. So over the next year or so, I put together this concept called the 5-stage development model, and it may be something that will relate to your challenge here, and maybe a little bit different approach that you're used to listening to when you attend various culture gatherings. So we'll start with this hypothesis, if you will, which is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, that sharing stock through an ESOP with employees is a good thing. And when combined with the, quote, right employee culture, ownership culture, if you will, the impact of the initiatives that you take to drive that culture can yield a bottom line, okay? And what it can do is it can increase what we call human capital for the business. It can increase an asset that you have related to how your people work together. And it can put more money on the bottom line by creating wealth. Well, what is culture? Well, we could go on and on talking about what culture is, but basically for this for this presentation, I'm talking about values, a set of behaviors that are based on those values, and the processes that we employ to try to generate those behaviors. Okay? And the phrase I like to use is you kind of know it when you see it, getting back to this issue of it's difficult to measure, but you really know it when you see it. When you walk into a company that has a culture that really works well, don't you really know it? Early in our ESOP experience, I hired a receptionist who had a number of other jobs, but one of her jobs was receptionist. She was not hired based on her technical skills whatsoever, but she was hired based on what I felt after a rigorous set of interviews. She had the qualities that mimicked the kind of culture that we were after. And she was at the front of the company when people would walk into the company and they would meet Andrea, okay, they just knew that there was something special about what was happening in the company. So why is culture important? Well, the culture is important because of the bottom line. And as we just mentioned, sharing equity plus the culture can give us a better bottom line. And that's borne out by some statistics. Secondly, that better culture can create an environment where we enjoy coming to work every day. And I think that's good. This relates to really the two basic reasons why we work. And we work, number one, for rewards, so we can earn enough money to feed our family and exist. But we also come to work, hopefully, for a positive energy. We do something we enjoy. Well, can employee ownership and the right culture produce results? Yes, and you've probably heard some of these statistics before, but in those kinds of companies that have been researched, the average wages are approximately 12% higher in those kinds of ESOPs. The average retirement accounts are about 2.5 times greater in those companies compared to companies that don't employ the culture and the ESOP sharing. And the average yearly post-ESOP improvement on return on assets is between 2.5% and 3%, which, as you know, when compounded over the life of a career in a company, can really add up to incredible wealth creation. Okay, ownership culture is important. Our behaviors at work do influence others, right? My theory is we work in basically two dimensions. We produce something ourselves. No matter what our job is, we are charged based on our job description to produce output and deliverables, but also we help others produce. In other words, we affect other people. That's kind of an interdependency that I think is often ignored in a company. So I'm continuing on this theme of affecting others. I would say that affecting others is a performance issue. We talk about the word teamwork. We all talk teamwork, but do we really expect it of our employees? Is that really a high priority expectation? Because it really is in our control. In fact, what I did was, as part of our performance evaluation process, obviously we judged our fellow employees based on their work performance, their technical competence, and their skills. But I developed an additional performance checklist that had nothing at all to do with their particular job. Okay, this performance checklist could be reviewed with every employee, no matter what they did. And you can see some of those line items, and they all relate to behaviors, and therefore they relate to culture. visibly supports the company's quality initiatives, eagerly seeks training, accepts ownership and accountability for a task, those kinds of things. But the one I want to point out is, at the bottom, has a definite positive effect on fellow employee owners. How is it that we as leaders and managers who are responsible for giving performance review so infrequently talk about how the employee in question affects other people? We need to do that. Well, can we get everybody on board in this culture? No. We know that that's virtually impossible. We try, but it's very difficult. Here is a sample of a statistical analysis done in I think it says 1,400 employees in ESOP companies. 9% of them said employee ownership is bad. Bad. 23% said that employee ownership could be good, but in this company it's bad. 54%, it's okay. It's okay. It's kind of a wait-and-see attitude. And 14% were really champions. Okay? So you've got this wide split of opinions about employee ownership in the typical employee-owned company. So don't expect 100% buy-in. Let's talk a little bit about what I call the people bottom line, getting back to this concept of a right culture contributing to the assets of a company. This concept called human capital, or the undefinable quality where a company has people that are really working well together and doing all these things that we think the right culture is all about, including trust and relationships and innovation and diversity and knowledge and skills and motivation and various commitment. And that list can go on and on. Okay? It really relates to financial performance. This asset that we're talking about really can't be found on the balance sheet. Okay? But again, when a company has this asset, we know it. Productivity. Here's an item that's near and dear to any manager's heart. It really is a key to growth and competitiveness, and the productivity that our company can achieve sets us apart from other companies that we compete with. And I would call it the measure of output created relative to the resources available. And this can be measured, and perhaps some of your companies have measured this. In our company, pre-ESOP, we were at about $90,000 per employee in terms of revenue generated. After we achieved some measure of the right culture, that number moved to $130,000. So that's about a 40-45% increase in productivity as measured by that particular metric. Again, this is a little visual that helps us understand that if you start in the upper right-hand corner, wealth provides a resource that's applied to a business as an asset. And you know, on the balance sheet, we've got assets that can be measured. Things like cash and machinery and equipment, building, inventory, those things are easily measured. But intellectual property, technology, people, we don't see people on a balance sheet. And this cultural edge that I'm talking about here, these are all assets. These are all assets that can be extremely valuable. That all leads to increased productivity and then more wealth creation, which can be applied to our assets. So it's a cycle that we really want to get into.
Jay, Sam had a question on turnover rates in ESOP organizations.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Sam, is a turnover rate higher or lower in ESOP organizations? You know, I don't have any of those statistics available to me, but just in bringing that issue up in some of the sessions that we have had over the last few years, it certainly appears that the turnover rate is much lower in an ESOP company than a non-ESOP company. But I think that's a metric that would be worth tracking down, and if we can do that, Sam, we'll do it and get it back to you, okay, if there's some really hard-hitting statistics on that. It's a good question. We would think that an ESOP organization, again, with the right culture, the turnover rate would be much lower.
I would agree, Jay. I have often heard at ESOP conferences companies informally mention that their ownership culture has really helped them increase employee retention compared to their traditional business counterparts.
Absolutely. And maybe some of the other companies on this call could share in that too. Again, getting back to the importance of the culture and this human capital issue, it's kind of in summary, it's an overlooked resource that improves productivity obviously. Good ownership behaviors can increase this asset. It's not easily quantified in the balance sheet, and it really is distinct from technology and equipment, but I'll tell you, if you've got the right people that are operating the technology, that are operating the machinery, operating the other resources that work together, it really enhances those hard assets as well. This is just another little graphic showing the same thing in a different way. On the one hand, we've got pure labor, okay, as an input to how productive we are. On the other hand, we've got these capital assets that are input to productivity. The right culture can enhance that productivity and create more wealth. Some of you may have heard the name Louis Kelso, who is kind of the father of the concept of ESOPs back in the 60s and 70s when he was an economist. He came up with this binary concept, and I don't claim to be an economist, but I think the concept is worth understanding and translating to your employees. I think it helps them understand what they have in an ESOP. And that's basically this, that there are two ways of earning income and doing work. First, through labor, pure labor, people work, physical and mental work. But the other is through the utilization of capital, okay, non-human work that is owned property, machinery, money, etc., and that capital works for us. So there are two ways of earning, okay? And this little graphic shows what we end up with in an ESOP, okay? At the top of the page, we've got, quote, worker and, quote, owner, really, that are one. At the bottom center, you've got the value of the capital in the company that can be used as collateral when you go to a bank, and you can leverage those assets so that you can borrow money and buy more resources. As you buy more resources, that capital value grows. So the worker owner now acquires capital before earning the money to pay for it, which is really an important concept, okay? What we have is, in the ownership culture that we're talking about, is we earn by owning, not just by working. And think of the implications of this, okay? And I don't want to get into the argument of, is there too much disparity between the highest earner and the lowest earner in a company, but I frankly think that in many companies that is the case. And the ESOP concept can help the worker, quote, average worker, that didn't have access to capital in the past, now start leveraging the value of that capital and earn not only through his wage by working, but also through the increased value of the capital. I think it's a very important concept for your employees to understand. Let's talk about really a key element of this whole exercise in culture development, which is leadership, okay? How do we achieve these behaviors that we're talking about? Well, we need to take action. We need to do things, okay, like leaders should be doing, but there are some obstacles. we make some assumptions that we have commitment from top management. I'm glad to hear that we've got some top management on this call today. It's a good sign that more and more of our companies are recognizing from the top that culture is so critical to their bottom line. We need to developing attitudes and behaviors that result in an ownership culture really is a leader responsibility. No two ways about it. Leadership has to take it on. I often get asked, well, where does culture development come from? Does it always come from the top? No, I'm not saying that it comes from the top. I'm saying it needs to be supported from the top. Often the seed or the trigger for better culture development comes from down within the organization, but as soon as top management understands that that needs to be done and they support it, then you've got a formula that's going to work. And we want to develop leadership skills in each and every one of our employees. So the recognition that we all have an impact on attitudes and behaviors is very important. And these leadership skills can cascade down through the organization, okay? Leadership is not relegated to the corner office. My philosophy is as we do leadership development training in our companies, we shouldn't strictly do it with management, okay? Develop leadership skills in every one of our employees. On the top of my desk here, as we're talking through this, I have, some of you have probably heard of John Maxwell, the noted author that writes on leadership. And he has listed a number of character traits that relate to good leadership. And I'm not going to go through them all. If you want to have this faxed to you, I can do that. Just let us know. The point I want to make, though, looking at this list, what jumps out at me is that generosity and what he calls servanthood are among these qualities. Okay, putting others first is really important. So the focus on a concern for others, getting others involved, concern for their well-being, concern for their involvement in decision making, right, is very, very important. So basically, an acid test for this whole process may be, do you really care about others? You need to ask that question of yourself. Here's a little, on this slide, this is highlighting the distinction between leader and manager. I'm sure there are a number of these kinds of things, but you can read it. Managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing. Managers acquire their power from their position, leaders from their power of influence. So you have employees that are influential right down through your organization. They don't have to have the title of a manager to be influential. Managers point us in the right direction, leaders take us there, those kinds of things, to differentiate between leadership and management. One way that you can start this leadership process is through the establishment of an ESOP communication committee. I know many of the companies in the network have already started this process. If you haven't, it may be something you want to consider because it can be a good launching pad for this leadership transition. Okay, Karen, I haven't been checking all the questions. Is this time for a little pause to answer some questions?
Yes, it is. Patricia asked a question.
The conference has been unmuted.
I'm going to take a moment for some questions. First, some questions have been sent in through the chat box. Patricia asked, can we get a copy of the leadership slides? The answer is yes. We will make the slides available to you in some format after this session, and we will communicate with you about how to access those. This is our first one. We haven't decided how we will do that, but we will do that. Also, Melissa has made a comment for all of us. on the questions of turnover rate. And she said that her turnover rate, and this is with Software Solutions in Cincinnati, has gone from 9.2 years at the time we became an ESOP to 10.7 years now. So there's an improvement. Are there questions? Everyone should be unmuted. Any questions?
Okay.
Proceed, Jay.
Okay. Now let's talk about this 5-stage process that I was referring to earlier, where from again, a leadership standpoint, we can kind of take control of this activity where we're initiating certain things within the company that we think are going to improve our culture. It's kind of a way to organize things to do, if you will. And you'll notice we're here at the beginning, and I've said nothing about hiring. It really starts with hiring because it starts with people. You need to select the right people, and you need to create, and I'm sure a lot of companies have done this, create an interview process whereby you sort out those kinds of behaviors that you feel are going to coincide with the kind of culture that you want. So this doesn't cover hiring. However, in looking at the concept of these 5 stages, it dawned on me that as you have an interviewee sitting in front of you going through the interview process, the 5-stage process could apply to that interview, okay? And you'll see why as we go through this. On this slide, this shows an upward projection. You can't miss the arrow there, right? Okay. An upward progress starting at the bottom with apathy. So my theory is the beginning point is apathy, and you need to bring that person or that company, if you will, out of the apathetic stage so that you can start reaching for results. And I might add here, this whole concept of these 5 stages applies to a person, it applies to a project team, it applies to a department, it applies to a remote location, because I know a number of your companies have multiple locations, which, by the way, adds an extra degree of complexity to your culture development, and I'm sure you know that already. And it applies to an entire company, okay? So, and again, there's no easy, if you're going to ask me how we measure this, there's no easy way to measure this, even though there are some surveys on the market, and that's for a separate discussion probably, and we can probably lead you to those if you want to engage in a company-wide survey that will help you kind of measure where you are cultural-wise. There are a few on the market. So, again, the concept is moving from apathy to a caring position where this person, and when I say person, I mean any of the entities that I talked about, cares about the goals of the company, what they're doing, and really working hard, and then moving them to an active state of what I call proactivity, where they're willing to get busy and do things and accomplish things. And once they're there, there's no guarantee that they're going to do the right things. So you want to point them in a positive direction so that they can achieve positive action. And once you've done that, you're ready to actually get some results. So the first stage is let's talk a little bit about apathy first, okay? What I mean by apathy is kind of a lack of interest and concern. We know what that is, a state of not caring, indifference, not willing to put in the effort needed. And the reasons for that are critical for us to know. Normally it's being uninformed or misinformed, or unsatisfied, dissatisfied, or there are other reasons for apathy. We got to kind of drill into the reason that this person or this company is apathetic. It's probably the most important and the toughest in terms of the journey to your culture development. Okay, so this particular journey takes us from apathy to caring. And again, let's start from the bottom and work our way upward. And at the bottom, at the basis, and there was obviously a reason that I put emphasize values and principles based on trust as the base. That 5-letter word trust, as you all know, is so very, very critical. And I think the trust is based on the values that you establish. And we can have various methods for establishing the values and principles. Many of our companies have mission statements or a vision statement, and we could all go through that process. That's an interesting process to go through. The second item is communicate the consequences of failure. Often it's been my experience that we don't do this, and we really need to be open and honest so that our employees know what happens if we fail or if they fail in their job. Next, it's develop and relate a business vision and strategy. And one of the first things we did at our company after becoming ESOP was implement a business planning process, an annual process that involved all the workers in the company to some degree, and it helped them understand where the business was going. The next is improve self-respect and pride. And there are a lot of things that can be done in terms of understanding that this is a good company, we have pride in our company, and that we all should have self-respect. You can get involved in the community, you can reach out. There are a number of things that we can do. What I'm giving you in these bullet points is kind of the what, the hows, the things that I am mentioning parenthetically. Most of these can be literally, excuse me, an entirely self-contained session, if you will, okay? And often in ESOP conferences, we'll attend a culture session that'll be focused on one or more of these initiatives and just elaborate on how you do these things. So again, we can do that at a later date, but I want to give you the basic initiatives here. Next, it's show what's in my best interest. I mean, we're human beings. We always react to what's in our best interest. And as you know, in an ESOP, there's a lot that can be said about what's in the best interest of every employee. Open book management would be something you can do here that would help the employees understand the implication of the profit relating to stock value, which then becomes their retirement. So that we know how that can be done. Performance feedback. This is the performance review process, if you will, but I prefer to call it performance feedback because my philosophy was not to overstructure the performance feedback process. In other words, I didn't say, you know, every March 1st, every employee will have a performance review and then we won't sit down with them again until next March 1st. No, my instructions for our leaders was give performance feedback all the time. And some employees need it more than others. Let's face it. Hand out praise and credit where deserved. And the emphasis here is on personal praise and credit. Obviously, we want to give credit to the company as a whole, but here we want to hit the individual right between the eyes with credit for doing a job well done. Understanding the mechanics and benefits of employee ownership. Here's where the ESOP Communication Committee can come in strong. They can really be your conduit to the rest of the employees in terms of the mechanics and the benefits of employee ownership in general. And then at the top is share information. And boy, there are numerous ways that we can share information through bulletin boards and newsletters and quarterly financial reviews and roundtables, and we can go on and on and on. I'm sure all of you have some good examples. But the idea is start sharing information. Okay? So that gets us to caring. If we could slide back to the very first point I made in the last slide, which was emphasizing values. Okay, this is kind of my concept of what we call the culture cycle. And again, this was kind of the bedrock that we start with in terms of creating a new culture, where we identify the values. And I mean specifically identify the values that we want to promote, and then based on those values, specifically identify the behaviors that support those values. And in fact, we have training sessions that we put on where we spend virtually the entire session talking about this and how to do brainstorming on behavior selection. What are the behaviors that you think belong in the company? What behaviors don't belong in the company? And most importantly, once you've done that, broadcast it. Okay, make it known what behaviors are accepted in this place and which behaviors are not accepted in this place. Once you've done that, then it's about the processes and implementing the action steps and the initiatives and the process to support those behaviors. So that's kind of the concept of the culture cycle. And we all know what values are, things like quality and customer service and integrity and innovation. There are many other values that you can incorporate based on your particular mission and vision. In terms of behaviors, okay, here's a list that some of you can identify with. Better communication, a sense of responsibility and accountability, the ability to participate, the issue of fairness and trust and teamwork and supporting fellow workers, and the effort to learn and honesty. You can see those things. Those are kinds of behaviors that would come out if you were to brainstorm a list of behaviors. You'd have a list a mile long, and then some of them would stay and some of them would go. Okay, so that's the kind of process that we would encourage you to go through in your company. We can help you do that. All right, the next stage, now we're caring. See, the assumption is we have this person or this department or this company that is basically cares. They basically care about moving forward and doing the right thing. So we need to give them encouragement. That's often forgotten, that just plain old-fashioned encouragement is a good thing to do. Training, teaching, and coaching. What you want to do is create an environment where learning is expected. Become a learning organization. Okay? Create a training resource library. Maybe you want to implement a tuition refund program as one of your benefits, which broadcasts the message, hey, we place a high value on you learning and becoming better. Demand personal responsibility. This is something that has to be done throughout the organization. It has to be a message that all leadership shares, and there's no two ways about it. There needs to be a sense of doing the job that you're asked to do and having that personal responsibility. Promoting participation. There are various ways to initiate participation, various small group sessions and bringing people together at lunchtime for small groups. Within each department or project team, giving constant feedback on the status of the various projects, what's happening, and promoting participation in every way you possibly can. Next is exercise open communication, and it's especially listening. I mean, it's kind of easy to talk for some people, not me, but it's easy to talk, but it's that two-way communication, especially listening, that I think is the distinguishing factor in good communication. And we need to train our managers and leaders in how to do this effectively. Just because, again, you've got the title and the position doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good communicator or necessarily that you're open to listen. Kind of a personal experience here. We were 2 or 3 years into our ESOP and the culture development process, and I was giving a performance feedback to one of my direct reports, our sales manager, and we were having a good dialogue, and she was communicating to me, and I was trying to communicate to her, and suddenly she looked at me and looked me right in the eye and said, "Jay, often I don't have the feeling that you listen to me." And that hit me right in the face. And it's from that point on that I kind of made it a high priority for myself to make sure that I not only listened because I thought I was listening, but the perception that I was listening. Okay?
Jay?
Yes. Yeah.
Sam has a question. He had his hand raised.
Yeah.
Sam, go ahead.
Thank you. Jay, if I could go back, unfortunately, 3 or 4 slides when you talked about trust as one of the most fundamental components in, I think one more, right there. The emphasis on the values and principles based on trust. And one of the challenges that I think we have, I have a couple managers here in the room with me, and overall I think that our ESOP's been in place for over 25 years, and none of us really feel that the level of trust from the employees or within the organization is beyond an average level. Do you find that to be common?
I do, especially in the early stages. Of course, you're not in the early stages of your ESOP, but that doesn't make you immune from that. I think trust is obviously so critical, but there's no magic bullet, Sam. Trust is developed like any personal relationship over time, and it's only through your actions and kind of walking the talk, if you will. You know, communicating it on one hand, but acting it out in another, that develops that trust. Trust is not something that can be turned on instantly, but I'll tell you, trust can be destroyed almost instantly. It's ironic. So, to answer your question, yes, I think that's common, and with the implementation of an ESOP in the early stages, especially, it's something that is misunderstood, and that's where this whole idea of educating the workers about what the ESOP is all about and how it can help them is so important, because lack of information breeds distrust.
Yeah, I think too that the current management team, I also believe, is paying for past problems. You know, for folks that have been here quite a long time. I heard once that trust is like a vase. If it shatters, you can put it back together, but it'll never really be the same anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if many of us are trying to put that back together, and if you know, for the wrongs that were done to people as it relates to the ESOP or the information provided to them because of it, if you ever kind of climb that hill.
Absolutely.
Never get past that, you know, where you can say you have an above average level of trust within the organization. I guess that's what my expectations are, just because of the fact that it's an ESOP, and I guess so I'm a little disappointed we're not really higher than what I would assume we would be.
Yeah, great point that you make, and I would say maybe the expectations are even on a higher plane because of the ESOP, okay, to have the trust. So in a way, it makes your job tougher. But you know, in fact, I recognized that not long into this whole process, that it was tougher to manage in an ESOP than in a non-ESOP. But to me, that was fine because it was fun doing it. Anyway, good input, Sam. Thanks. Get back to where I was here. We're kind of close on time, but I want to get through the points at least. I went too far here. Okay, is this where we were? Yeah, this is where we were, right? Let me kind of move quickly through this stage to get us from caring to proactivity. Participation, open communication, especially listening, provide support resources. Obviously, we all know as managers that one of our main responsibilities is to provide resources for the people we manage. We know that, and it's got to be done. Problem-solving skills, a hot button for me, okay? Often in any company, but especially an ESOP company, we need to have problem-solving skills. And we've designed some specific training sessions around problem-solving models, and I would encourage you to do that training for all of your employees so that they can take part and participate in problem-solving. You can't expect them to participate in problem-solving if they don't know how to do it. Assertiveness, this is something that we need to develop over time. Encouraging questions, and treat criticism with respect. No retribution if they ask a question, even if it's kind of off target, and encourage them to step forward. Okay, now we got them working. They're proactive. Okay, they're ready to get on board and do things, but they're not doing the right things. So we need to get them focused on doing the right things. So assign specific tasks. And what I mean by this, I have kind of just a fundamental document that should come out of almost any meeting that you have where a decision was made to move forward with an action. Okay, it's very easy. The left-hand column is an action. What are we going to do? And it begins with an action verb. Okay, it's the activity. The middle column is who's going to do it. And the right column is when is it going to be done. Very simple. You can add other columns as you wish. But basically, if you come out of every session you have, either in group or one-on-one, where you've decided to do something and document that, that's going to go a long way. Next is determine improvement projects and priorities. We developed, as I said, a business planning process where we involved the rest of the company. And it's through that process that they developed the knowledge of where the company's going. What are the priorities? What are we going to be doing next year, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years? The next is display indicators as measures of performance. Okay, and this is very, very critical as we start to measure. The old adage that you don't improve something you can't measure. Well, you need to measure your performance indicators, whether it's if you're a CFO, you want to measure EBITDA. If you're a sales manager, you want to measure sales revenue. If you're in the warehouse, you want to measure the number of missed picks that you're sending out of the warehouse. Those kinds of things need to be clarified and posted. Clarified decision-making process and authority. This is a critical thing that hits you almost as soon as you become an ESOP, because as soon as people hear that they're going to become owners, their view of the decisions that they're going to be making sometimes takes on wild fantasy, okay? And we know that. So you really need to clarify who makes the decisions. We know that in a typical ESOP, the chain of command isn't going to change drastically. It may become a flatter organization, but it's not going to change. And the key thing here is that you involve employees in the decision-making that they're best able to take part in. In other words, if they have knowledge in an area that needs a decision, that's when they become involved. Last is know how my job contributes to the bottom line. This is kind of a bellwether as far as I'm concerned. This signals that you're about ready to arrive when you can walk around the company and you can ask an employee, what are you doing today? What are you doing right now that's going to contribute to the bottom line, and how is it going to contribute to the bottom line? And if they can look you in the face and answer that question with knowledge and authority, now you're on the right track, because they understand what the bottom line is, they understand how their job affects it, and they want to make money. All right, now you've got them moving in a positive direction, and the way to get results is reward them, okay? And the ESOP is a great reward. There are other ways to reward them through bonus plans and dividends and team lunches and pizzas and all that kind of stuff. But be very aware of how you reward and recognize your employees. You want to set high standards. You're an ESOP now. You're going to be the best company in your class, and your standards are the highest. Set consensus goals and objectives, okay? Again, this relates back to the vision and the business plan and how the teamwork in the company now understands what our goals and objectives are. Hold them accountable, okay? This is the essence of being an owner. You're accountable for what happens in this business. And this needs to happen through the way leadership communicates everything in the company. And finally, okay, celebrate. When you do have a winner in your organization, when you have a winning project, when you achieved your results, don't be afraid to celebrate. And it doesn't have to be expensive, okay? You don't have to spend a lot of money to celebrate. You can do it in a number of ways. Okay, 2 minutes after 11 o'clock, and that's where I am. Just a couple conclusions here, kind of wrap it all together. These behaviors really become a way of life, okay? This is, these behaviors or the actions to get us there aren't on some manager's to-do list somewhere. They're a way, they're in our fabric, okay? 2, the leaders need to be developing other leaders. You know, good coaches, football coaches, develop other good football coaches. So you need to develop leaders. And 3rd, everybody in the organization is going to recognize how their positive effect affects others in the bottom line. Okay, Karen.
The conference has been unmuted.
Thank you, Jay. You all should be able to ask questions or share comments as we conclude this webinar. Are there questions?
Karen, it's Jim Strayhorn with Smith & Schaefer.
Hi, Jim. Please go ahead.
I was just wanting to clarify, this PowerPoint will be made available to us?
Yes. PowerPoint will be made available, and Jay and I will develop a format for sharing that and communicate with you how that will happen.
Great. I would like to say, Jay, you did a wonderful job. We're working on some of these issues right now at Smith & Schaefer, so thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
I had one comment on trust. It seems trust is complicated, and often the sources of distrust are confusion or a lack of understanding, and people often need to develop a sense of confidence and pride in their own work and their own role first, as a first step in developing trust within the organization. And that it's something that would be something you'd work on in an ongoing way, helping people develop their understanding of the ESOP and the business and what everyone's role is, and that would help trust grow as a foundation for teamwork. Any comments on anything that Jay has shared with us today about creating an ownership culture?
Jay, this is
Yes.
Mindy Meeks with Software Solutions.
Yes.
I really like the performance checklist. I think a lot of times we get lost in our review process, just reviewing the performance of the individual and not thinking about how they perform in accordance with the ESOP standards we've set. My question is that it jumps from question 5 to 19 on that list. Are all the ones in the middle just general questions?
No, in order to fit it on the slide so you could see it in one slide, I cut the form in half, okay?
Okay.
I could send you that form if you want.
I would love to see the rest of the questions.
In its entirety. I think there were 22 or 23.
Yeah, there's 22 questions listed. So.
Yeah, I just kind of put a gap in the middle just so that I could make it large enough so you could see it on the slide. That's why there's a gap, and you notice. Yeah,
we are actually getting ready for our annual performance reviews, and I think this would be a great enhancement to that.
Okay.
To give people also feedback on how we feel they're doing in relationship to ESOP culture. So. That's
fine. And you are again who?
Melissa Meeks with Software
Okay, Melissa.
Solutions.
Karen, can you make a note of that, and we'll send that to Melissa or anybody else that would like a copy of that checklist. Just email us or put it. You will get a feedback form automatically emailed to you, so you can give us feedback on this session, and you could include the request in that.
Okay.
Jay, I made a note, and we will make that form available in some way to those that are interested, and so we'll let you know that that's available as well.
And we do have some upcoming events, Karen.
So, coming up in June, on June 8th, Eddie is the Southwest Ohio. This one-day conference, NASA in Blue Ash, will cover a variety of sessions for individuals working at all levels in your company, their understanding of their ESOP and building an ownership culture. And as you can see, we'll have ABCs of ESOP, session on governance, repurchase obligation, business literacy, and other important business and ESOP-related topics. On June 15th, we will have a one-hour webinar, presenting and teaching others about your ESOP summary plan description. This is part one of a multi-part series on understanding and teaching your SPD. This one will focus on ESOP plan provisions in acquisition of shares, eligibility, contributions, allocations, and vesting. As Jay mentioned, you will receive an email feedback form for this webinar today, and we encourage you to send us your input so that we can provide future subjects that you need and improve the presentations. So if there's other topics pertaining to culture, if there's some points that Jay mentioned today that you think, wow, I would appreciate a whole one-hour webinar on this topic, please let us know. Is there anything else we should cover, Jay, or anyone else have comments or questions before we close? At this time, we will end the webinar if there are no further questions, and we thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Please stand by.